Here are the main things to consider when trying to decide which Festool track saw to get. And the first thing to consider is blade size, which will determine the maximum depth of cut that you can make. Here on the bottom we have the 55s, the HKC 55 and the two TS 55s. And they have 6 1/4 inch blades that will give you a maximum cut of about 2 inches. That's on the track. You add about 3/16 if you're cutting off the track. Then here you have the two new TS 60s, and they have blades that are about 6 5/8, and they can cut up to about 2 3/8 inch thick, again, while it's on top of the track. And here you have the biggest one. This is the TS 75. The blade here is about 8 1/4 inch, and the maximum cut on this one is 2 3/4 inches. The next thing to consider is whether you prefer to have a saw with a cord or a battery. And if you're going to choose battery, you've got these two down here. And there's a number of differences between the two. This TS 55 is a more traditional track saw, and it has two 18-volt batteries, giving you 36 volts, which makes it a very powerful track saw. The HKC 55, though, is actually more of a traditional circular saw, but you can set it up to have it do plunge cuts. And you do have a guard on the blade that you have to pull back to use. And it runs on just a single 18-volt battery. So this one actually gives you quite a bit more power. Now, both of these saws will fit on the normal tracks, but the HKC 55 will also fit on the FSK auto return tracks. So you can clip it in. On the bottom, it has the two angle finding studs, so you can butt up against your material and cut any angle you set. The saw stays on the track, and the track auto returns by spring every time you're done a cut. Now, these two TS55s are identical except for a few things. The first thing to note is that the TS55K is a cordless model, so it's the one that has the batteries, whereas the TS55F is a corded model. And the other difference is in the anti-kickback technology. On the TS55F, you'll notice that riving knife is right in line with the blade. So the riving knife will go down into the same cut that your blade is traveling in, preventing the boards from pinching together, which can pinch your blade and cause the kickback. The TS55K, though, you can see that the riving knife, which actually isn't a riving knife, sits beside the blade. And so it sits down on top of the track and is engaged, and if the saw ever lifts up, that riving knife will trigger a mechanism which will apply a brake and stop the blade from turning, preventing the kickback. And then these two are the new TS60s, which are the latest and greatest versions that Festool has come out with. A little bit bigger blade than the TS55, a little smaller than the TS75. They have the new anti-kickback technology of the TS55K that I just showed you. And one thing that I really like is that they both work on both types of tracks, the traditional ones and the FSK ones. So these two actually have the most features of any track saw Festool has ever made. But this one in particular has all the latest and greatest features that Festool's come up with, and has one more that no other track saw on earth has, which is this scoring blade out front, which is really handy for those people that work with materials where you really need to get a very clean and precise cut on material that has a high likelihood of chipping out. That scoring blade will give you the best chance to have the cleanest cut ever. So it really comes down to taking a close look at the material that you mostly cut with your track saw. If it's mostly bigger, bulky stuff, then the TS75 is probably the way to go. If you cut some big stuff and some small stuff, then the TS60s are great. If you want to have a really well-rounded cordless version, then the TS55 is a really good one. If you're more out on job sites and just have to do a few cuts here and there and want to make different angled cuts, then the HKC is a great option. If you want the one that has the most features and most functions and fits on all the different tracks, then the TS60 is the way to go. Or as I mentioned, if you're one of those craftsmen that really needs a scoring blade on the front of your track saw, then this is the one to go with.